Yay. Um, Thanks, Jessica. Jessica's tuning in from New Jersey. So we have New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. I'm so glad for all of you who are here live. And if you're watching the recording, welcome to my kitchen. I moved to Lenox a few months ago, and my husband already found some special edition Norman Rockwell plates that actually happen to be the 4 seasons. It's really kind of neat. We walked into an estate sale right when they were closing shop, and they were like, just take whatever. And he saw those on the wall and knew what they were. I didn't know. So anyway, there's a Norman Rockwell museum right near here. So I love that it's meaningful in that way too. So let me tell you what we're going to do in this time together. I'm going to show you how to make kitchari. And we're going to start there because I want it to be cooking while we're then talking, and we can talk more about like, what is kitchari, why we're using the different ingredients that I'm using or choosing for tonight's recipe. I have a recipe. I will cut and paste it in the chat, but I will also send it to you in like prettier form in an email with the recording afterwards so that you have that for yourself. And then after I get the kitchari started, we can talk about any of your questions that you might have. I'll talk a little bit about what it might be like to be part of an Ayurvedic cleanse. It could be something you do once a week. It could be something you do for just a day. It could be something that you do for a week or so. And I'll be leading a 10-day cleanse program at the end of October 27th through the November 6th. Just so you know, it's not 10 days of kitchari, it's up to 5. And we'll go through all of like what that could look like and how you can customize it when you sign up for the program. So how many of you have made kitchari or have heard of kitchari before, or maybe had it at Kripalu while you were there? Okay, so you're relatively familiar with this dish. So tonight's recipe I'm inspired by one of my mentors, Kate O'Donnell. She has written this really awesome book, and then in addition to several others, this is called the Everyday Ayurvedic Cookbook. Highly recommend, super easy, simple recipes, and there's a lot of great information. You've never made it yourself, Jessica. Okay, yeah, it can be a little daunting the first time. We were talking about it yesterday with my group in the Mind Body Reset, and somebody likened it to trying to make pizza if you've never made pizza before or never had it made for you. And I was like, okay, I get it. Maybe not so adventurous in the recipe department, but that's why we're here. So this is a book I highly recommend if you like making stuff and you want to have a little introduction to Ayurveda. The other book that I really love is called What to Eat for How You Feel. And this is by Divya Alter. And Divya has opened a restaurant in New York City that is an Ayurvedic kitchen. She also offers wonderful master classes online. And here's the trick. You don't actually have to make kitchari from scratch if you don't want to, because Divya sells packets. They're already pre-made, pre-measured. You've been there, Jessica. I want to go so badly. And you can get them delivered in a couple of days if you live here in the Northeast, because she's in New York City. There's different kinds for different needs or different seasons, like warming versus soothing versus bold, which would be like fall versus summer versus spring. And she also has some wonderful soup packs, like lentil soup, that can be a really nice cleansing food. I have these on hand, not just because we're doing this together, but because once in a while, if I'm traveling and I don't know what I'm going to make, like it's just already ready. I don't have to worry about preparing anything. So, and I highly recommend these because their spice mixes have been like tested and are so wonderful. So anyway, that's my little, like, you can do the cheap version and just get the pre-made packs and add water and watch the magic. If you were feeling adventurous and you wanted to do a recipe, today's cleansing kitchari recipe, I'm going to use green mung beans, and we'll talk about different possibilities in a little bit after I get started. But these little guys, you would soak at least overnight if at least for 3 hours, if not overnight. And I did them for a day and a half, mostly so they would actually start to sprout. And if, I don't know if you can see here, but they start growing these little tails. And it's super easy to make your own sprouts. You would just make sure to change the water every day if you're doing it for more than a day. And depending on the temperature in your house, it could take a day and a half. It could take 2 days, sometimes up to 3 if it's really cold. But usually after 2 days, it's just fine. And you can eat them just like that. Throw them on your salad, especially in the spring. They're a great food, but we're going to cook them tonight. And then I already have pre-soaked rice. And you want to soak the rice because it will also help it to digest. Same thing with the mung beans. And it actually makes everything cook faster. So if you're like, why does rice take so long? Throw it in some water for a little bit before you cook it. So I'm going to start over here with my pot and warm some, probably about a tablespoon. Actually, I'm not going to use that one because I'll use that for the spices. A tablespoon of ghee, and I made this ghee. It's super easy to make, but you can also get some that is pre-made. Please don't buy the stuff at Trader Joe's. It's not really ghee. It's just clarified butter, and that's why it kind of looks funky. If you see it on the shelf and it's separated, it's not ghee. It has to be like thick like this to be ghee. So I'm going to warm that up with some spices. So for tonight's version, I'm going to welcome people who are jumping in. I'm going to use cumin, coriander, and fennel. And I know there's somebody in the room who doesn't like cilantro. Maybe there are more than just one of you. And feel free as I'm doing this to hop on with questions or take yourself off mute. But I just want to make sure I get my own recipe right. So I'm going to use about a 1/4 teaspoon of fennel seed. And I'm going to throw that in with the oil that's warming up so that the spices can release their flavor and their properties. So fennel. And then for coriander, this is coriander seed. And I am using the whole spice, not the powder. You can absolutely use the powder, which is what I recommend if you're one of those cilantro people and you're worried about coriander. Because most people who don't like cilantro actually don't mind coriander if it's powdered. It doesn't give off as much of the flavor. I like chewing into, like having the coriander seed pop in my mouth when I'm eating the kitchari later. If that's not you, don't worry about it. And then about a 1/2 teaspoon of cumin seeds. Now, if you're hell-bent on no coriander and no cilantro, I totally get it. It's fine. You just didn't get the gene that can handle it. I'm just going to warm these things up until they start to pop a little bit or until I can smell them, which is already right now. One thing I want to mention, instead of coriander, it doesn't have the same flavor profile at all, but you could just take the coriander out and up your cumin fennel game, or you could add black mustard seeds. They're these tiny little things, and that adds, a nice digestive spice to things as well. So once you've got the spices fragrant, you're going to add the rice and the mung beans and stir them around so that you can coat them with the spices. I just realized that I forgot my ginger, which is fine. I'm one of those people that doesn't like to measure things or follow directions always, but tonight I'm following my own directions. So I have some ginger that I've grated, and I usually like to keep some fresh ginger in my freezer so that it's super easy and I don't have to worry about, is it going to go bad or get moldy and all that jazz. So I've added the ginger in with the spices, and I'm just coating everything in ghee and spices here. So now I'm going to measure out some water. And for this recipe, I've made it a smaller batch. Some recipes, especially in the cookbooks, will be really big batches. And for me, that's like, hey, it's just me eating it or me and my husband, and it's just too much. So when you get the recipe, just know that it'll be maybe 2 or 3 servings, depending on how hungry you are. Now I just took this out of my teapot because it's just easier for me, but you don't have to have it be hot water. And I'm gonna add the water. I'm gonna add some turmeric. I think I have it at about 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm good on like heaping teaspoons. Like it doesn't have to be perfect, exact measurements. I'm also for tonight, and this is totally optional, gonna add about 3 curry leaves. They look like tiny little bay leaves, right? And you can get these at any place that has loose leaf herbs and spices. You can also get fresh ones if you live close to an Indian market, which is super awesome. And I'm also going to add in some seaweed soup mix. This is just my own little handwriting here. And I got this from the Seaweed Man in Maine. I'm going to put about a tablespoon of this. If you have other kinds of seaweed, you could put those in like nori or kombu. I really like the Seaweed Man's mixture. It's like a mix that he recommends for any kind of soup that you make. And this just adds some extra minerals like iodine and all kinds of other goodness to your soups, in this case, your kitchari. So I'm going to pause and let it boil up. And while it's doing that, by the way, isn't this a fun spoon? One of my friends got it for me, and it has this little slot that I can just put right on the edge. And I call it my Kitchari spoon. So I'm going to come check in. I think somebody's trying to get in. Sorry, Elise. And see if you guys have any questions. So the Seaweed Man is like this. He's an older gentleman, like legit old school Maine. And I think one of his apprentices runs his social media, but you can look him up on Instagram. It's called The Seaweed Man. And Sarah, if you look up, I think it's theseaweedman.com. If not, it's seaweedman.com. And he's in Maine. Salt, Kitcha, thank you. Yes, add a little bit of salt. This is everybody's preference, but I use about 2 large pinches, which would be maybe 1/2 teaspoon. And then I check it closer to eating time. And sometimes I sprinkle on a little pink salt as I'm serving it. So let me just scroll back through. Why don't you add the turmeric with the other spices? You could. I find that turmeric, because in this case I have it ground and dried, it can sometimes burn a little faster than the other spices get fragrant. So for me personally, especially cooking with gas instead of electric, I just don't want it to burn. It doesn't matter quite as much. If you have fresh turmeric, access to that, which by the way, I haven't been able to find out here in the Berkshires yet. I'm on a mission. But I know like if you're in the Boston area, Whole Foods has it. Some of the other Asian supermarkets have it too. Changes your whole world if you have fresh turmeric. Like everything tastes amazing. It looks like a miniature version of ginger, but it's highly orange. So careful what you touch after you grate it. And it tastes like a really brilliant carrot, like the sweetness of a carrot. It smells amazing. It's so awesome. Anyway, great question, Nicole. Man said, I heard that Kitchari can be made with either ghee or coconut oil. What do you think? Yes, absolutely. You can use sesame oil. You could use sunflower oil. You could use olive oil if that's what you have at home. Usually that tends to be a little bit more heating and sharp. And so we already have a lot of heating spices. And in this case, because I'm making this particular version for this time of year, we might already have a lot of accumulated heat from the summer, which is why I'm not adding the mustard seeds, even though that's my normal preference. And I'm not adding any pepper. Like we already have a lot of ginger going on in there. And ginger is much nicer to the system without overheating it, especially if you're like a fiery person, like I know I am and some other people on here tend to be when it comes to digestion. So I'll be right back with the questions. It's boiling now, so I'm gonna add the carrots that I've chopped. You can use any seasonal vegetables. I chose carrots because I have a lot of them from my farm share and because they're a root vegetable. If you were making this, again, for this time of year, maybe you could use some squash. You could use the last of the summer squash, for example, really nice. You could use beets, another root vegetable, sweet potatoes. It's up to you, but carrots is what I chose for tonight. What's the difference between ghee and clarified butter? So ghee, Mary Beth, has been cooked longer. Clarified butter is like, hey, I'm warming the butter. And ghee is a process where you let it continue to warm so that all of the liquids, all the water comes out of the ghee. And you're left with something that is pretty close to dairy-free. Even though you started with dairy, like it cooks off all the other stuff and leaves just the pure oil. So it's super easy to make. Like maybe I should show you guys that one someday too, because it takes zero time. It takes whatever sticks of butter you have at home, and it's so simple and nourishing. And if you need to grab some off the shelf in a pinch, like that's fine too. Was that helpful, Mary Beth? Okay. Let me know if you have any other questions. I think I got to all of them. If I didn't, feel free to poke me or take yourself off mute if you like. So I'm gonna let this simmer now for probably 20 minutes. It might take 25. If you don't soak your mung beans overnight, it might take longer to cook, might take like 40 minutes, which is another great reason to soak your mung beans in addition to just being easier to digest. Has anybody ever had these green little mung beans before? Either in a dish or cooked with them? I'm seeing a lot of head shakes now. Yeah, so this is a mung bean. Sometimes it's pronounced mung, M-O-O-N-G, and because we're transliterating, we're translating things that come from languages that aren't in our alphabet, you'll find all kinds of different spellings, like M-U-N-G or M-O-N-G, M-O-O-N-G. You'll find them in the Chinese section, the Japanese section, the Indian section. You can kind of you might have to look for them. And not every store, like not every supermarket will have them. You'll find them more in a natural grocer. What most supermarkets do have are the split yellow mung dal. And so these are the same thing. It started here and they've been split. So there's no green skin on them and they're cut in half, like they've been split. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. In fact, this is what I use most days for when I make kitchari. But because I'm doing it as a cleansing version, I'm going to use this mostly because the extra skin has the fiber that will help when you're doing a cleanse and eating this multiple days. Now, when you're eating Kitchari for multiple days, for example, in an Ayurvedic cleanse, you might feel like you want to switch things up just because you get bored or you just want to try something different. Or if your digestion feels a little bit wonky, you can try something different. Another nice legume to use for Kitchari, and especially in the summertime, is split red lentils. And these cook up super quickly. So if you have split red lentils and rice at home, you don't have to soak them. You can just throw it in the pot, throw it in your Instapot, and cook it up quickly like that. They all have different benefits and they all have different qualities that they can help balance. The red lentils being the easiest to digest. Sometimes I'll suggest this for people who have like slower digestion, or sometimes when you start a cleanse because you're doing something different, it's like, whoa, Nelly. So then I'll have people switch to using this, and sometimes switching to quinoa instead of rice. So you can absolutely mix quinoa into it. You could also do like some of Divya's blends include, like this one is the balanced Kitchari, which is the summer Kitchari, and she has just quinoa, no rice. One of her other ones, I can't remember which one it is, has a mix of rice and quinoa. So you don't have to like be only one thing or only the other. You can work with what you have. Which one's your favorite? The red lentils, Kitcha? Yeah. Lisa says, will you be sending us the recipe? Yes. In fact, I can copy paste it here if you're desperate for it right now, but I'm also going to send it to you in an email in like prettier format. But here is the recipe, if it will let me. No, it won't let me paste that big of a thing. I will send it to you in an email, Lisa. Are the mung beans in the Asian grocery store dried? Yes, they're always going to be, you're always going to find them dried. So like I said, if you're using the green ones or the yellow split ones, you're going to want to soak them for at least several hours, even better if it's overnight. And that's honestly one of the biggest reasons why people don't make Kitchari or don't try to make it, is because they think they have to, you know, worry about all this preparation in advance, when literally it's just like, put it in a bowl, add some water before you go to bed, stick it on your counter and leave it out. Like, no big deal. Any other questions? During the cleanse, can we have different versions of the Kitchari or the same for 5 days? Yeah, you can absolutely switch it up. One of the things that happens, especially because culturally we're used to, at least in the United States, because I don't know about Brazil, we're used to having sweet things for breakfast or in the morning time, which is not a problem. In fact, Kate O'Donnell, the first cookbook I told you about, she's the one I've been doing the training with to do the cleanse leading. So we're using her methodology and all of her recipes. Of course, I'll be happy to share some of my like variations as well, but she has a couple of great breakfast Kitchari recipes that include like pears and dates and a little bit of sweetness, which I think a lot of people like to have that first thing, and then they don't feel like they're eating all the same spices all the time, because there's no, you know, cumin in the morning Kitchari, for example. So I'm just checking on it here, and I'll just show you. It's just bubbling up nicely. Got my carrots and everything. You don't usually have to stir Kitchari too much until maybe you start seeing that the water is getting soaked up, and you want to just check and make sure that things are cooking. And if they're not, maybe add a little bit more water. In the end, it's kind of going for the consistency of a stew. There are times of year or times when people's tastes want more of a pilaf. Like in the summertime, you can make it more pilafy and dry. But because we're heading into the fall, we want something a little bit more wet, not super soupy, but you can absolutely make it soupy as well. Did that answer your question, Kitcha, about the Kitchari? Yeah. Can kitchari be frozen? Do you mean like, do you mean like, can I freeze it and save it for another day? Or did I buy it from Trader Joe's? And I'm only picking on Trader Joe's because last night in the Mind Body Reset, somebody in the group had said, like, do not buy the stuff from the Kitchari from Trader Joe's that's pre-made. She said it was awful. So I've never tried it, and I don't know if it's frozen or fresh. So yeah, you could. Ayurveda kind of poo-poos leftovers. I'm one of those people that's like, hey, if it's practical and it's something that you made ahead of time and you're eating it within a relatively reasonable amount of time, when I think of frozen food that's been in the freezer for too long, I think of my Swiss grandmother. Like things from like before I was born that had the date on them. When I found them recently, I was like, no, that maybe no. You lose a lot of the prana. And especially during a cleanse, if you're doing this for that reason, if you're making kitchari or eating kitchari for that reason, you want as much of the prana from the food, the energy from the food as possible. So one of the things you can do if you have an Instapot, I've got my trusty Instapot right here, or a slow cooker or a rice cooker works as well, is you can make it in that, and then it's, programmable, and you can keep it warm, and you can just have it in there all day, which if you're working from home, for example, that's great. I have a little, one of those things that keeps it warm if I'm traveling somewhere or going to a place to go to work. So yeah, that would be, I would say I'd rather like pre-make it and have it in the fridge rather than like freezing it and then defrosting it if it were me. But if that's the only way you're going to do it, then that's totally fine. Sarah said, do you use an immersion blender or just leave it as that wet stew? I'm asking because sometimes I can get others in my family to try new vegetable stews if I blend the stew. Yeah. So Sarah, that's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. So when you do if you were to make kitchari with the red lentils, it's basically these are gonna melt. They melt. It's like that plus the rice. So most people can get around that. And even the mung beans, like they get, the yellow ones in particular as well, will just kind of blend in because it's all yellow, right, from the turmeric. With the green ones, you can see them, but they're really small. So if you want to blend it, great. Part of the thing that I love about this version with the green sprouted lentils or sprouted mung beans is that they have a little bit of a crunch to them, not in an uncooked crunch kind of way, but in like a sprout kind of way. And so you would just lose a little bit of that texture if you were to do the hand blender. Yeah. Any other questions? So, what's the big deal about kitchari? Is anybody kind of feeling that question? Kitchari is kind of like chicken soup to India. It's one of these foods that's comforting, it's nourishing, and it's often used when someone's in a healing phase or a rejuvenative kind of phase of their life, whether they're quite literally like ill from something, or they're just really stressed out, or they're, needing some of that comfort food. So it is said that every household in India has their own Kitchari recipe because every household in other parts of the world has their own like chicken soup recipe, right? And much like chicken soup without the chicken and all the other ingredients, but in the same sense, Kitchari is a one pot complete meal. And so you're getting all of the nutrition and nutrients that you might need, especially if you're doing a mono diet, to rest your digestive system if you're in that healing phase. You know, if you're coming out of recovery from like cold or a flu, you want to keep your food really simple and you want to keep it nourishing at the same time. Kitchari has both nourishing and cleansing qualities and characteristics, which is why it's so often used in an Ayurvedic cleanse program or protocol. And the spices are key because those help you digest. In this case, I've chosen some warming spices, but not too warming. You know, in the spring, when you kind of want to turn up the heat a little bit more, or later in the winter, or maybe when you're not doing a cleanse and you just like the flavors, you can add different spices and turn up the heat. Here, because I'm doing it as a cleansing kitchari, I want to keep enough warmth to like help with the digestive fire, or what we call Agni in Ayurveda, but not overwhelm with heat, because we're just coming out of the heat of summer. So a lot of us still have some heat built up in the system. You know, what is an Ayurvedic cleanse? So an Ayurvedic cleanse is basically a period of time. It could be any number of days that you choose, where you're eating a mono diet so that you're giving your digestive system a break. And part of that is to help increase the digestive fire, which can sometimes get gunked up or bogged down by seasonal shifts, stress, just life. In this case, summer's heat. In other cases, it might be winter's sludge, you know, those kind of things. And it can help. Spending a few days just eating this mono diet can help you remove toxins a little bit more effectively than if your digestive system's trying to like grasp for whatever energy it has to deal with whatever you're ingesting. It can also help motivate circulation, and it's a gentle way of cleansing. So often we debate whether or not the word cleanse really is appropriate in this case, because you know, it's really more of like a reset, a digestive reset. You're not restricting yourself in terms of, you know, only drinking juice or only having certain like cayenne and lemon juice and maple syrup or whatever other super restrictive cleanse diets that are out there. And so what I found is that it's also something that I tend to really enjoy about once a week. And so in our household, Mondays are always a really sort of busy day of like getting back into the swing of things. And it's just become Kitchari day. And my husband, even like if we are traveling, which is probably the only time we ever eat out a lot, is when we're not at home. It's like, oh, he comes home and he says, I need Kitchari. It's just like this comforting food that feels nourishing and good. And you can change it up with all different kinds of seasonal vegetables. So one of the reasons why an Ayurvedic cleanse is really nice is because you can do the cleanse while you're doing your normal life. You know, often if you're on the super restrictive or juice only cleanse diets, it's really hard to have any energy whatsoever to do the normal things that you want to do. You probably want to take a break from eating out and partying for that, you know, couple of days or week if you're doing it. And it's super accessible. You know, it's a simple recipe. It's not expensive. You know, mung beans and rice are fairly cheap, especially if you get them at the Asian markets. You know, and you probably have most of these ingredients at home, maybe not the mung beans, but a lot of the spices as well. So just want to check in and see if there are any other, yeah, rice plus legumes equals complete protein. Yeah. Any questions or comments so far about anything I've said? I'm just checking on it, and it's the water is starting to get absorbed. So I'm gonna grab my trusty tasting spoon and see how we're doing in terms of whether the mung beans are cooked or not. Mm. Yeah. Oh yeah. So it still has a little bit of water in it. I'm coming over to share. Probably best to do with a gloved hand. And by the way, Kitchari can be a great food for your dogs. I am not even kidding. My dog loves Kitchari. So we've got this not quite pilafy consistency, but it's definitely not soupy. It's very stew-like. It feels warming. And if you wanted to put the stick blender to it, great. My husband is one of those people that prefers like chunky food, chunky soup. So this is going to be perfect. So I'm going to turn it off, add a little bit of salt because I noticed that felt missing for my taste buds, and just stir it up. By the way, you could also use like fresh bitter greens like kale, Swiss chard, any of the spinach. Some people, spinach will get slimy if you throw it in too early. So you can throw in those lighter greens later on in the process when the kitchari is almost done. I'm also going to slice up a lime. Now you could use lime or lemon or none of the above. I'm choosing lime because it's a little bit more cooling than the lemon. And for the cleansing kitchari this time of year, I don't want to, again, overpower the heating elements of things. I'm just checking here in the chat. And I'm going to just let that sit for a bit so that it's not so hot when I try to serve it. So one of the reasons why, a cleanse can be really nice this time of year in particular is that the juncture of the seasons, particularly the one moving into fall and the one moving into spring, are times when your body's naturally going through a change and a detoxification process. And so anything you do to support that can help set your digestive system and your immune system up for the season that's coming. Sometimes if you wait too late in the season, like if you're trying to, cleanse in the winter, but you haven't quite taken care of whatever needs to balance out after the summer, it might be a little too late, but you could cleanse any time of year if you're, working with someone who says like, hey, now is great. Or if you decide like the once a week kitchari, I don't call it a cleanse in that case. It's just what I choose to eat. And some people, myself included, will cleanse for other reasons. Like this summer, with the guidance of Kate O'Donnell, I did a slightly different version of a cleanse as part of a preparation for trying to conceive. And so it's very common for couples either to do it together or just the one who will be pregnant by themselves, so that 3 months later, the egg and or the semen that's produced is of higher quality, of just healthier quality, so that there's a better chance for things to happen. So I did that earlier this summer. And because we're trying to conceive and because I've already done that, I'm not going to be cleansing in the fall like I normally would. I absolutely do that twice a year, except this year. So that's kind of new to me. So my version of like the cleanse is going to be doing more of the self-care pieces. And that's one of the things that I love about Kate O'Donnell's methodology is it's not just about the food. It's really about taking the 10 days and dedicating some time for self-care, maybe less exercise or just less vigorous exercise. You just want to rest and rejuvenate and nourish yourself. And so things like Abhyanga, which is a self-massage with oil, is something that we encourage you to do every day or, as often as you can, to nourish the tissues, not just from the digestive system, but also in other ways. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on like one example of somebody who might not cleanse, but also a reason why, you know, people who are trying to conceive might cleanse, but then, you know, having timing with that. Helpful while healing an injury. Yeah, I would say it's a great chance to, you know, help take care of yourself. If the injury is digestive system or internal, I would say that's not a great time. But if you're talking about like muscles or other things, if it's a broken bone, I would probably say no, just because your whole body's resources are going to that. And I'm actually curious what Kate would say about that, so I can get back to you too with a more specific response. But if it's like, oh, I have a, you know, my neck or something, and you're working with that, you could. I would just say, like, check with your energy levels and see where you're at with that. One of the things that can happen after a cleanse, especially if you're doing like 3 to 5 days of the Kitchari, plus the pre-cleanse and then the post-cleanse, sort of easing in and out of it, is people will find that even though during the time that they're eating the Kitchari, they may feel a little like lower energy, that afterwards they have restored energy. Yeah, it's totally normal to feel afraid of that low energy. And really, it's not, I think the people who tend to have the low energy, it's that they haven't figured out which Kitchari version works for the digestive system, or they're not eating enough, which is often the case. And so, you know, if you need to eat Kitchari for four times a day, great. You can pretty much eat as much as you need in order to feel nourished and have the energy that you need. It is recommended that you maybe slow some of your activities down in terms of like vigorous exercise and things like that, because you want as much of the energy to go to like this gut healing situation that you're promoting. Can you drink milk during the cleanse, like regular milk, Nicole, or nut milks or nut juices? Say that again?
I've been drinking goat milk a lot.
That is awesome. I want to say yes. Basically, you can eat or drink anything that you want during the cleanse. It's that when you turn towards the Kitchari a little bit more and turn away from some of the other things, that you give your digestive system more of a chance to like really do this thing. So if you're like, I can't live without my goat milk, or I just, even for mentally, sometimes people can't let go of coffee, for example, it's totally fine. You know, is your system going to benefit from like 7 days without coffee? Yeah. Is it bad if you have it because coffee is an addictive substance and you just can't live without it? Or the ritual of it is sometimes something that people have trouble letting go of. That's totally fine. You know, and that's where you can really customize this. And especially if it's your first time doing it, some of those things are harder to let go of, you know, those little rituals that we have with regards to food. And so Kate has actually put in her recipe booklet some alternative recipes. Like if you're like, I can't do Kitchari again twice a day, maybe you just have Kitchari one of the meals, you know, that's okay too. And she's given some other seasonal recipes that you could pick as different foods. She's also given some suggestions about like, you know, if you're feeling a little low energy and you want to do half a slice of avocado or half an avocado with some salt, you know, there's lots of different things that you can do to customize this and really support you during this process without feeling like all of the restrictive energy, because it's not really about that. It's really about nourishing and giving your body a break. So then the question is, how do you do that? And it can look a little bit different for everyone. Thanks for asking that question. Anybody else have questions while I serve this up? I wish y'all were here. It would be so much fun. Oh, and oh no, I did remember to do that. See my little doggy here? She's ready for some kitchari. So I'm going to put some fresh cilantro on top because I like cilantro. If anyone here does not like cilantro, it is not necessary. In fact, cilantro, any kind of herb isn't necessary. You can just eat it as is. You can also eat it just the rice and the mung beans. And then my little lime on top. Some people eat it with a spoon. Some people eat it with a fork. That's just up to you. I just have to share with you guys just how close, whoops, so many little things, just how close this puppy dog is to the action here. Whoop. She's right there. She's like, hey, I smell rice. I smell kitchari. All right. First thing I get is that lime because I just had it on top, but then it's like all the herbs. And I love it when I get that little coriander seed and it pops in my mouth. I haven't gotten that yet, but it is, oh, it's just hitting me right here in like a warm, soothing kind of way. It's so good. And the carrots are so delicious because they're from the farm, not too far from here. It's still really hot. One of the things that can happen if you eat a lot of kitchari, for example, during a cleanse is, or you're doing the mono diet, is that it's all kind of on the softer side as far as food goes. And so I like throwing the carrots in because they tend to have a little bit more like al dente crunch to them. Because I start to miss the crunchy factor when I'm doing this for 5 days. So one of the things that you could do, especially if you live near an Indian supermarket, is try what's called papad or papaduns. And they look a little bit like tortilla wrappers, but they're made from lentils and spices. This one in particular is made from the same red lentils I just showed you and some other spices. And they come sort of in this dried, half-cooked way. This one's broken, obviously, but 30 to 45 seconds in your microwave. And by the way, I was taught by someone from India to put it in the microwave. The first time I tried to do it, I put it in a pan and it took forever to crisp up. And she's like, oh, just put it in the microwave. So, but not only are they delicious, they're a little bit addictive because they're kind of like if you were to have a potato chip in India, that's what it would be. But it adds a little bit of that crunch, and it's often, excuse me, it's often similar spices to what you're using. They have different ones with different spice mixes. So you can see that really flat thing now kind of bubbled a little bit. You might have had this at an Indian restaurant. Yes, it is gluten-free because it's just lentils. And you can double check, like when you go, everything is labeled. This just has yellow lentils, white lentils, celery, coriander, black pepper, clove, cumin, and chili powder. There are lots of different variations. Just make sure they don't add anything other than lentils and spices. There's like one brand that I was told to stay away from, but I haven't never come across it myself. And if you don't like it as spicy, you can get a different kind. If you like it really spicy, they'll have like spicier version. And it's really crunchy and super delicate and kind of fun to just break off and eat and share. So that can be something that you do because it's fun and it's tasty, but also if you're missing that crunch. Another thing that I tend to miss personally is sweet. So at the end of the day, even if I've had like a breakfast kitchari at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, I usually end with a little piece of chocolate because I'm Swiss. Yeah, and it's totally fine, right? Except on a cleanse, that might not be the best choice. Again, if you can't let go of it, like don't restrict yourself. And what worked for me when I did the preconceiving cleanse was a date. Kate said, just try having a single date and see if that does it. And what I find is when you're cooking with spices that really take care of all the different tastes, then, and you're nourishing yourself with really nourishing food, your body doesn't crave as much of other things. Often it's like I said, the crunch factor, or in this case, a little bit of the sweet. But if you have sweet potatoes in yours, maybe that takes care of that for you. Or maybe you don't miss the chocolate and you can come back to the chocolate later. Kitcha says rice, quinoa, and carrots version. Yeah, beautiful. Patricia says, yum, thanks. I'm going in from the car. Cool. Any other questions or comments? Or just want to say hello or come over? Anybody close enough? I'm here alone tonight. I'm solo parenting with the dog because my husband's away. But if he were here, he'd be ready to eat this too. Sarah said, what about baked apple for something sweet? You know, I'll ask, she puts the apple in the Kitchari recipe, so I can imagine that would probably be okay. But I'll ask Kate what she thinks about that. Normally, my guess is, from what I know and what I've heard her say, she would say maybe the apple as like your breakfast in the morning or your pre-breakfast. But then at the end of the day, you know, you don't want to mix fruit with food too close together. And so during the cleanse, she doesn't really recommend a whole lot of fruit or snacking. So that's where the date for me really helped. And the fact that, like, if I'm truly hungry, then I'm going to make myself a small bowl of Kitchari, or just, you know, if it's in the Instapot or ready to go, just eat some more Kitchari. And then that hopefully satisfies that need. If it's more of like I need something else, like the crunch, then the papadoons or the carrots or something else. Good question, Sarah. Well, thank you all for joining me in my kitchen tonight. Feel free to let me know. I'll send you guys an email with the recipe, and I'll link to the recording too, in case it's helpful to like have me on with you in the kitchen when you're trying to do this. And feel free to reply to that and let me know, even if it's like a month from now when you try it for yourself. Is anybody interested in the like prepackaged Divya's stuff? Because I can add a link to her website too. You're welcome, man. Yeah, okay, I'll add the website for that. The other person or company that makes like a prepackaged situation is Farm True, and they're in Stonington, Connecticut, which is another thing that I love, is these are all really local New England businesses. They tend to specialize in like ghee and ghee related products, but they also have created a cleansing kit, which includes Kitchari, which has no ghee in it. It's just like this. And the reason why these are so handy is they've pre-soaked the beans and the rice for you and then dehydrated them. So they cook up much faster. You know, ideally you're making your own, but in a pinch, or if you're trying to get started and you want to try these delicious versions, they're great too. Okay, Mary Beth, yeah, I'll send you the link to her site, and you can check it out. Cool. Banyan Botanicals might have a Kitchari kit. Yeah, so Mayanne, I know that Banyan Botanicals has a spice mix, and I used to use that for the first several years of my, you know, foray into Kitchari. It can be a little potent for some people, which is why, especially for a cleanse, or if you're just getting started with Kitchari, that might be like too much, pushing you too over the edge, or too weird or too different in terms of the spice profile. And then they sell like the rice and the mung beans, and then you put it all together. I don't think that they have like this pre-soaked, like all together package, but I could be wrong. Maybe they've updated their products too. But that's a good point, man. Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop the recording, but if you're here